last. If he didn't make it, he would have been drafted into Mussolini's army, and things would have been very different. He didn't need to be drafted. Upon arrival, he became a citizen and enlisted in the U.S. Army. He decided to serve his adopted country. Barely able to speak English, the war effort sent him to Greenland as part of the Army Corps of Engineers. There he helped build and maintain a weather station and airfield. In fact, I think Dave Rickard was in Iceland when he was in the Air Force. These projects allowed the Allies to make accurate weather forecasts for the North Atlantic and defend the strategic cryolite mines used in aluminum manufacturing. The almost permanent night in sub-zero temperatures made it back-breaking labor. That said, when I asked my grandfather about it years later, he said, I had food, I had shoes, I had work, I didn't complain. Besides, I loved America. When he returned from the war, he eventually settled in suburban New Jersey, married my grandmother Mary, and had 2 children, my dad John and my aunt Margaret. He got a job working for the local King supermarket in 1954 and eventually worked his way up to store general manager. At about that time, he joined Rotary and remained an active member his whole life. He loved his family and loved his work. He loved serving the community. He was known for slipping a free box of cookies into the grocery bags of unsuspecting customers when they weren't looking, but their children were. He knew the names of all his patrons. He never missed a day of work and never, to anyone's knowledge, complained. The modest store was the most profitable and highest grossing in the chain, beating out larger and more modern rivals until he retired 4 years later. That was small stuff. At his wake a few months back, a man I never met or heard of came up to me and introduced himself. He wanted to tell me his story. That man, now a retired farmer sales rep, was once a checkout boy. He was going to night school and needed a few hours off to interview for a job opening at Hoffman LaRoche, the big drum company in New Jersey. He didn't own a car and was trying to figure out how to get to the interview. When he asked for the time off, my grandfather handed him the car keys and said, "Go get the job." The man did and never forgot about that. I heard many stories like that during the course of that afternoon. The stories embodied who my grandfather was. He was the kind of a man who loved Rotary. He wore his Rotary pin everywhere, and I mean everywhere. I remember seeing it pinned on his trademark blue blazer, even on weekends. Yes, he was the type of guy that would wear a blazer on weekends. He was on countless committees and dedicated any free time he had to his club. In retrospect, now that I think of it, he didn't have any hobbies. Serving his family, church, and community was it. He was much better at it than he would ever be at gardening, and he knew it. More than this, he was the kind of guy who believed that when you take care of the community would take care of you. He believed that it was his responsibility to do so freely, and not because someone told him to. Having witnessed fascism firsthand, he had a deep distrust of those who coerced people to help others. He warned that all too often, the seemingly altruistic motives were purely self-interest disguised as a handout more than likely to be taken from someone else by force. If you didn't want a Mussolini, then don't give him a reason to exist. Serving others of your own accord preserves our freedom more than anything Thomas Jefferson ever wrote. To my grandfather, Rotary was more important than voting and more American than a Buick in his driveway. For this reason, when you told me about Rotary Local, I couldn't help but think how my grandfather would have thought that it was a brilliant idea. He would be very proud of that effort and even prouder to be associated with it. Thank you for the opportunity to remember him in this way. Yours very truly, Eric Delmonico.